What's up, fam? This is the day the Lord has made. We're here to rejoice and be glad in it. Let me welcome you to the Single City broadcast on the Hope TV. It's my prayer and my sincere desire that you are empowered, that you are inspired, that you're staying safe, and that you're encouraged. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Hope TV on today. As you know, many of you who've been with us, we're serious about providing you quality content on a daily basis. We're offering 6, 7 programs every day. So excited about the opportunity to present things that can be uplifting to you, because certainly in these times we need some uplift. We started our first broadcast in the pandemic on March 19th, and from March 19th until today, we've had over 11 million views of our content through our cumulative platforms, and that's all because of great people like you. And so as you're watching now, would you please consider following us on all things social media? You can follow us at the Hope TV on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and even subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the channel. That way, whenever content is uploaded, you get notifications. You also can follow the church on all things social media. The House of Hope Atlanta has a YouTube channel you can subscribe to, House of Hope Atlanta Facebook page, and HOHATL on Instagram, HOHATL on Twitter. Please follow us and help us. Brothers and sisters, it means the world to us. And if you're watching by Apple TV, Roku TV, Twitch, Amazon, YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, through the househopeatl.com website, the edwardSmith.org website, if you're watching through the church app, however you're watching, thank you for being a part of our programming. It means the world to me. Also, those who may be watching on the Dr. Edward Smith YouTube channel, thank you as well. Those numbers are growing significantly. I thank God for you. And so I'm excited about it. As you're watching, if you're watching through a medium or platform that will allow you to subscribe, to like, to share, or comment, please do so now. Your engagement helps our algorithms tremendously. So please subscribe to the channels. Press that like button. If you can do it on that medium, please do it. Keep liking, keep liking, keep liking, keep liking. And right now, take this opportunity to send this link to about 5 people. Just share the word. Please, right now, while you're watching, go ahead and send it. I promise you, it's going to be a great website, webisode, and a great broadcast on today. So while you're watching, go ahead and send that link. If you can do so, send it to 5 people right now and let them know that the Hope TV is on the airwaves. We had a great conversation last week. It was so powerful that we were not able to finish it. Single in the City, which is our broadcast, which is designated for those singles under 40. It's been incredible. I think our first Single in the City broadcast was on March 24th. And from March 24th up until today, we have been blessed. My goodness, this has been one of the flagship programs, one of our top programs out of the 35 programs that we're now offering. This has been one of the top broadcasts, and each broadcast of Single in the City is getting about 50,000 views, and that means the world to us. And we got an incredible conversation today. We had an amazing conversation last time that dealt with the call of ministry, and we heard their journeys and how they got to where they are today. We brought them back to continue this conversation. We have with us today Pastor Jen Carter, who is Executive Pastor of Membership Care at the House of Hope here in Atlanta, serves with me. Pastor Carter, God bless you. I want to welcome her back to Single in the City. How are you?
Great. Thank you for having me back.
God bless you. Also, we have Pastor Trey Woolfolk, who I've known for a very long time, since he was 9, 10, 11 years old, I believe. Pastor Woolfolk, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you so much, Pastor, for having me back.
And last but not least, Dr. J.C. Howard, who I've also known since he was a teenager, who's now pastoring House of Hope in Macon. Dr. Howard, how are you, sir?
I'm blessed, man. Good to be back, Doc. Thank you.
Glad to have y'all. Glad to have you back. You know, last week we started the conversation. We dealt with seminary and theology, which I think was important because we do it with everybody to tell their story and their vocation. But this was the first time we had 3 preachers on Single in the City. So we got started a little different, a little top heavy, and things like people maybe ask the question, well, this is not practical, it's not relevant, but I need people to know who you were, because we knew we were going to get down to the nitty gritty. And I think you kind of laid your formation where you were theologically, things you gleaned. And so we heard your heart, and we know who you are in terms of ministry. Well, we closed out last week talking about this whole thing of dating and how you've been able to navigate, how you're navigating the space in terms of the coronavirus. I want to ask a question about, I want to pick back up that conversation in terms of dating. I want to start with you, Pastor Connor, because you mentioned last week something that your father said that I think is very, very powerful, and some things that have kind of concerned me too. There are a lot of beautiful, powerful sisters in ministry. And unfortunately, sometimes our sisters who are in ministry, ministry can have a negative impact on relationships, even in terms of dating. And because I know you're all singles, you're under 40, and just like a single nurse who may have problems dating in Atlanta or dating on in their vocation, I want to hear from you. Has your ministry adversely affected your prospects in dating? Has your ministry enhanced your dating life? Has it been, a stain on your dating life? Tell us about that, Pastor
All
Connor.
right, so I can break this down by telling you a story about my senior prom at Central. So I had been preaching maybe for about 2 years without the license when it was time for my senior prom. And I really was feeling the captain of the football team at the time. And I felt like, you know what? I don't see why he can't ask me to the prom. And I found out, after prom had passed, I actually ended up going with my god brother. I asked the guys, I said, why didn't you ask me to the prom? Now that we're friends, we can talk about this. Why didn't you ask me to the prom? And he said, because I thought you were going with one of the disciples. I thought that you were going to be going with Jesus to the prom. So I think a lot of people make assumptions about your sexuality, meaning that you don't have it, that your sexuality is somewhat muted because you're a female pastor or a female preacher. I think people don't look at the fact that though you are a preacher, you're also a woman first. So I think one of the challenges is that people make a lot of assumptions about who you are as a female leader, female pastor, and it just short circuits the opportunities for connection. For example, a guy may, on our first conversation on the phone, ask me what I think about Ezra. And I'm like, look, I don't want to talk about Ezra. I don't want to talk about Nehemiah. I thought we were here to talk about you and me. So I think one of the challenges is that people just make some really false assertions about what we as female leaders want, or us as female preachers, what we really want, thinking that we want someone who is theologically deep, or that we want someone who wants to talk about the Bible all day, when we are more layered than that. Female pastors and female leaders, we're not monolithic in the sense it's Jesus all day. It is not Jesus all day. We want to hang out. We want to have fun. We go on a date. We don't want to listen to TD Jakes. We don't want to listen to total praise. We want to listen to some secular music. We want to enjoy life just like anybody else. And so I think if we can remove some of those stereotypes and some of those assumptions and some of those false assertions that we make about women in ministry and women in leadership, it would be such an easier thing. It would be so much easier to date.
That's so good to hear you say that, because I think if people saw you from a distance, they wouldn't know that you have a sense of humor. They don't know you like to laugh. They don't know that you like to have fun. And I think sometimes it's the power of your presentation and who you are. They put you in this nice, neat box, and not realizing there's a package that could be unwrapped. That could be a beautiful gift, a beautiful present, if you can look beyond your call. I appreciate you saying that. Dr. Howard, tell me, how has being a pastor? You've pastored, you've been in pastoring for a while, from youth pastoring to young youth and young adult pastoring, and Mount Bethel, to pastoring at St. Ruth, and now House of Hope here in Macon. How has pastoring as a single affected, enhanced, or has had an adverse impact on your dating life?
First of all, I just want to say I appreciate Pastor Carter's reflection. I was hollering over here. I want to listen to Jake, man. Turn on
Me
some
too, bro.
David. I was hollering over here.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that reflection, Pastor Carter. Listen, Dr. Smith, it's just being all the way 100 with it. you have to navigate this thing, man. I've been preaching since I was 17, 18 years old. And so I was a young preacher, Morehouse College, all the way through my college, matriculation, seminary, of course, doctoral work until now. Youth pastor, youth, young adults. And so it's been it's been a training day. And shout out to Denzel Washington. It has been a training process in terms of learning how to really deal with your flesh, learning where to go, where not to go, learning to leave that door open when certain individuals are coming to have counseling. You have to be real with yourself, and you have to be real with the context. Because the reality is this, especially with young preachers, young male preachers in specific, it's almost the adverse effect, Pastor Corner, because with young male preachers, and if you got a little, good look to you, then, it's assumed that you're promiscuous. It's assumed that you're sexually promiscuous and that you trying to, you know what I mean? You preaching hard in the pulpit and you doing something else at the crib. And so, those assumptions, I think that you are totally right, Pastor Carter, and certain assumptions are made about preachers in particular, or people with public professions. When you're a public identity, when you're a public face, there are certain assumptions that are made. And or even in power, positions of power, because as a preacher, there's power in that, and it's a powerful position as a preacher, and even as a pastor, especially. I mean, you are literally overseeing, or you are depositing and imparting in God's people, and so it's seen as a position of a power, of authority, and you have to understand how to hone that in. You have to understand when to get up out of there. Amen, church. And you have to understand when you need to navigate, and when you need to move, and when you need not to respond to every DM message or whatever have you, because you learn over time, particularly when you start preaching young. I know some preachers start a little bit later, but when you start preaching young, as a young brother, when you start preaching young, you know the signs. Come on, church. You recognize the signs. You recognize when a supposedly innocent message is starting to turn into something else. And so you have to really know yourself, man. And you have to learn from others. You have to learn that from people that have come before you. One thing that I've really tried to hone in on is learning from people that I've seen go through some stuff. As it pertains to sisters or whatever have you. But I'm gonna keep it 100. A brother ain't never had any problem. Because listen, I'm gonna keep it real, man. I'm not one of those preachy cats that I'm preaching all the time. I'm not, I don't act 70 at 25. I wasn't doing that. You know what I mean? You have those young preachers. They act like they're 65 when they they 15, and you act like an old man. No, I was in the trap before I was in the pulpit. Okay, and so I brought trap mentality to my ministry. All right, so yeah. I never really had an issue with the sisters before preaching, during preaching, and I don't plan on having it when I'm married, because that's my baby. And so, I never had an issue with it, Dr. Smith, but I've had an issue with learning myself and learning how to handle my own proclivities and to deal with that and to be able to manage what I do as a leader, as a preacher, and as a public professional.
That's good. Pastor Trey.
Well, I would answer in two parts, Pastor. I would say, one, it has adversely affected me, because there is a prevailing thought, especially where in my hometown, our hometown, is that if you are in ministry and not married, this somehow invalidates your usefulness or your gift. And I think so. I've had to kind of work and navigate that. I've been up for churches who I think loved my gift, but didn't like that I didn't have a first lady, and therefore passed for me, which for the good, because I wouldn't be where I am right now. But I think that being single in ministry has, from the perception standpoint, the perception is that, as my brother just said, that if you are attractive, if you are gifted, you must be doing something, and so that's just always an assumption. It's a very unfair assumption, because really, if I may just speak very frank, there are only three rumors as a preacher, male preacher, you can have. You're either stealing the money, you're on the down low, or you are promiscuous, for lack of a better term. And so I think that the perception overall is that. And so you'll get, if you're masculine and you're gifted, then you must be doing all of this other stuff. And it's almost like the elder brother from the prodigal son story. People start to put on you what they would do if they were you. That's what the older brother did to the younger brother, right? And so that in that regard, it has adversely affected. But also, I would say one thing that I haven't heard mentioned yet, but I also think it's something should be mentioned, is that of course church and preaching has its own level of celebrity to it, and so therefore you find those people, at least in my experience, you meet those people who have these superficial interests in you, who only really want you because of who you are, and what you are publicly, but have absolutely no true dedication and loyalty to what you're trying to be. And therefore they'll do everything to get close, but as soon as they get close, then and they don't get what they want, all of a sudden now they're becoming one of your worst critics, right? And so I've had to make the adjustments as my ministry has progressed, to start seeing myself as that. I struggled seeing myself as the person who people would do that to get close. But the older I got, and rock bottom teaches you a lot more than mountaintops. And so hitting situations and encountering certain situations, it really taught me to see myself differently, and to also know that every godly approach is not always godly. Every oh, you preach well today, you minister to my soul, could sometimes be a trap door into let me get to know you further, and in that situation. So I've had to be on guard as a single about who I allow in my space, because if not, there are people who can wear masks and perpetrate these things that they aren't, only to get to a certain point to get what they want out of the situation.
That's so good. I think about when I was pastoring, single. Andrea and I dated, but she never was part of the ministry. So she's the only person that I dated seriously, but I never dated anybody who was part of my church. But you both are right, guys, in that she was the only serious relationship I had. But you're both right in terms of how men navigate in terms of single ministers versus how women navigate, which is one of the things that I've tried to share with Pastor Carner, that sometimes this unfair advantage and these double standards, that I don't want them to
Absolutely.
I want her to lead from a place of weakness. I want her to lead from a place of strength, because they're already in a deficit. A single male minister can date two or three women in the church, or be caught, and it's expected and it's okay. People come and the mothers will introduce their grandchildren to the male minister who's single. But if the single woman minister, if she's caught with two or three guys, going to the movies or having dinner, then she's Jezebel. Pastor Carter, have you experienced that in terms of that double standard, where single male ministers are able to have a certain level of flexibility or understanding in terms of their dating versus women who are single in ministry? And what is your experience been?
Absolutely. I think that when we talk about sexuality, um, the way that a woman's sexuality is regulated in the church is completely different.
Wow.
And it can be denominational, because I grew up seeing the young lady who had to come before the church and repent if she got pregnant outside of marriage. But I'm like, where's the dude? Where's the
Yeah.
guy? It takes two.
Yeah.
So I think
Indeed.
I want to be very clear. Female and male sexuality, we all have the same feelings. But I think that the way the woman's sexuality is regulated is completely different. And it's not fair. And I think the way that I made my peace with it is, I have a rule. I do not date at the church where I serve. It doesn't work for me. I have male colleagues who met their wife on first Sunday when she came around to give her offering. That won't be my story. I choose, for the sake of my ministry and just understanding that I'm in a system that is patriarchal. We have not shifted the pendulum yet. It's still a very patriarchal system. I've decided that I will date 400-mile radius. You got to be at least 400 miles, because my church is big. Our church is big, and we have 7,500, 8,000 members. Somebody's cousin know the person that you're dating. So I try to keep a distance between my church life, my work life, and my personal. And it has worked for me up until this point. It has really been a blessing not having to look out into the audience and say, "Oh, we went out last Thursday." I don't need those kind of problems. So I'm good. Yeah.
Pastor Dr. Howard, Pastor Trey, what do you think? What do you think in terms of either male ministers and just men in general, in terms of dating a female minister? What has your experience been in terms of the perception that men, whether they be in ministry or not in ministry, what is their perception about women who are in ministry in terms of dating them? Would your colleagues date a single female minister? Would your friends date a single female friend who's in
It's
ministry?
crazy because it's really, and thank you for the question, Doc, and thank you for that reflection, Pastor Carter, because a cat will look from the pews when a sister's preaching and be like, Doc, Doc, she look good, Doc, but won't date her, doesn't want a serious relationship with a preacher. And I think it really ties into a few things, Dr. Smith. First thing is, I think that Pastor Carter hit the nail on the head, and that is we live in a patriarchal society. And so patriarchy, in a cultural sense, has for many years, mid-centuries, spilled over into the church, still does. And there are individuals like myself, you're like yourself, Dr. Smith, Trey, many other pastors who really try to deracinate that kind of patriarchal system, but it spills into the church. And so because we live in a patriarchal society at large, we already demonized women for promiscuity or for sexual energy or sexual feelings, whereas the brother that's dating multiple women is a player, but the sister who's dating multiple men is a garden tool. And so, what happens is we've set up these systems that have literally brainwashed, not just American, but all of Western civilization. All of the civilization. I mean, don't let me get me started on the Middle East. And so we have these systems in which we oppress women's sexuality. We oppress their sensibilities for the sake of dominance. And because of that, it spilled over into the church, and women preachers suffer as a consequence. Women at large suffer as a consequence. Number two, again, and you touched on it, Dr. Smith, we want to be the HNIC. We want to be in charge. You know what I mean? And I think that there is an issue with male sensibilities and with male sensitivity as it pertains to dominant women and strong women. If you look at Pastor Carter from the outside, or if you look at any other woman who is a public personality, they are dominant, they are strong, they are aware of themselves, they're sure of themselves, and they don't mind walking in who their identity is. They don't mind in walking in who God called them to be. And there's a very small percentage of men that can be secure enough in who they are in order to say, baby, be you, do you. I'm a shout from the pews. If I'm not a preacher, if I am a preacher, we're going to tag team. I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader. There's a very small percentage of men who are secure enough in themselves. So it speaks to masculine insecurity. There is a masculine insecurity dynamic going on in all of society that pushes us in a position of not wanting to deal with dominant, powerful, public personality-driven women because of our own personal insecurities. And it's a problem, and it's been a problem, and it takes for these kind of conversations in order to unpack and develop that ethos.
So what you're saying, Dr. Howard, is just not a woman in ministry piece. It's a lot. That's just a microcosm of a much larger issue. It's just women, strong women in general, whatever the field is, that's masculine insecurity. Wow, I agree. Pastor Trey, what are your thoughts on this?
That there's a false idea of what a woman like a Jennifer Garner is. I think when you see her preaching, when you see her running things, that there's an idea that okay, she's gonna try to tell me what to do, and that again is what my brother was saying, a masculine insecurity. But I also think, and I'm gonna probably start a little something with what I'm about to say. There are some that can navigate both, that can be in leadership, but then also be coexist with the man and not belittle that man. But there also are some exceptions to that, and I think sometimes the exceptions make it hard for those that it doesn't apply to. You understand what I'm saying? And so therefore, when you have certain sisters, and it's certainly not all, who do have those struggles and have to do that, I think that creates a bad stigma. I think it can. But I think between the exceptions and also between just the idea that you think that that same person you see on that platform is somehow coming home, and it's really not the same person, because most of us, if we're honest, we have to put on a cape to go to the platform, but when we get back home, we're Clark Kent, right? And so therefore, people, when they see a superwoman like a Jennifer Garner, they'll see and they're like, oh my gosh, she's gonna come home with that cape on. How do I handle her? When the truth is that after the lights are off, after the benediction is over, the truth is she's still Jay, she's still Jen. And so I think that's a struggle for men. I think the perception, but I think also we've seen exceptions where there were women that were, just drunk on power, and they ran everything, and therefore you weren't the husband, you was like a second son. And so I think just those two things, I think those kind of compound to create the perception I think that we have with women in ministry.
Yeah. Have you ever heard that, Pastor Carter? Because I've had conversations with guys about the same conversation. Is in their minds, if they saw a woman preaching, a Cynthia Hale or a Gina Stewart, in their minds they can never translate, how can she be my woman? I don't want a pastor. I want her to be my woman. Can that preacher, can she be my woman? Can she be my lady? How can we further break that down to let guys know, to build a masculine insecurity, to build security rather, to let guys know that this is a woman. This is a fully, this is a full-grown woman who just happens to be called by God to do this job, right? So how do we, I don't know if you've experienced that, but I'm just trying to help, because what I don't like, you having to date 400 miles away. I think it's a wise practice to not date in the church, but that's somebody that may be interested in you, that may qualify. I don't want you to also miss out on your blessing, because that's the first time I heard you say that. Because I've always encouraged single men to not date in the church, and if you had somebody that you want to date, to let me know so we can kind of navigate together so the church is not a mess. But if there's a nice guy in the church who's really fond of you, who's really interested, and who's really serious, I don't want you to allow those insecurities and the systems, because I wouldn't tell a single minister in my church to date 400 miles away if that's somebody he's very interested in and they're very interested in him. I don't think it's fair to you. If somebody has met that particular quality, I would not tell you that. I would not, if that's somebody that you're interested in, and they have those qualities, I wouldn't do that. But how do we help to break that down further, to let people know that this woman is a full bona fide woman who just happens to be served, who just happens to serve God?
I think it starts with you guys. What you are doing right now, Dr. Howard, I appreciate your remarks so much, because it hits differently when it comes from a brother. When you speak the language of equality and you speak the language of dismantling patriarchy, when a brother says it, it carries a different connotation. So I think this is what we're doing right now is important. And then I also believe the program that I'm in right now, African American Preaching and Sacred Rhetoric, being exposed to a lot more womanist resources, have helped me to understand this issue better. And I encourage you guys as pastors and as leaders to expose your congregations to Katie Geneva Cannon, to expose your congregations to some of the writing of Donna Allen, Elaine Flake, where they unpacked this whole idea that it's in our pedagogy, the way we preach, making sure we take certain dehumanizing aspects of the text out and preach in such a way that we remove some of the stigma attached with femininity. I think by doing that, we teach our churches that it's okay for a woman to date. It's okay for a woman to have sexuality. We got to kill some of these images of women being a Jezebel because she dresses nice. or sin bringing Eve, or wilderness whimpering Hagar. We've got to find ways to preach text that build femininity and build women up, as opposed to continue to promulgate some of these negative stereotypes and norms. So I think that's how we approach it. That's the way that we make things better. Because I'm with you, Pastor. I would love to date someone who's a little bit closer. It would cut out on flying and traveling. I would love to
Yeah.
do that, but I think we got to do some work on a very basic level to get things started in that way.
JC?
Yeah, can I just comment on that real quick? You're absolutely correct. Patriarchy can't be dismantled from the sisters. The sisters didn't create patriarchy. We did. Men did. And so men, it's just like white supremacy. That's why black folk can't be racist. We didn't create the construct. And so whoever creates the construct has to dismantle the construct. And so patriarchy cannot be dismantled and be deconstructed until men begin to say it's wrong and this is what we're doing, or check themselves when they are patriarchal, right? Like, white folk, you need to be honest with yourself to say, I have white privilege and I understand it now. And this is what it means. And that's how you begin to deconstruct these social systems.
You know, I'm glad you said that because I'm going to push on that in a moment. But I want to just get a little more meat off of this bone. When I'm here having a lot of conversations with men, when you talk about womanist theology or those who are feminist, do you see womanist theology or feminist theology as being an attack on men? Because a lot of men are feeling as if somebody has that perspective, there's really a hatred or an antagonism toward men. You know, so I want to hear what you, Pastor Trey, you want to say something about that? I saw your hand.
And womanist theology is not balanced, it can become to an anti-man type of perspective. But I think when it is balanced, it's really balancing the scales that have been imbalanced for so long. I think I think that there are always extremes, and I think sometimes with extremes, I mean, in case example, I understand that those that are part of the LGBTQ community, they are pushing for their rights, but I think even their pursuit, if it's not balanced, can become more antagonistic than it is being an activist on their part. So I think with balance. With imbalance, anything can become adversarial, I think, at any point. But I think that I don't automatically, when I meet a womanist or a feminist or a theologian, I don't automatically assume that she's anti-men. But I think women have been oppressed for so long, and even as we're talking about the challenges with taking a progressive and a powerful woman as a mate, I think that is also compounded with trying to combat this idea that women are domestic beings when they in fact can be the breadwinners. They in fact can be the ones that are pursuing and progressing. So I think overall, I think that those of us on the man side have to put up with somewhat of the imbalance, because it's been so imbalanced so long that I think we have to give them a level of grace to be able to balance the scales in their perspective. If that makes any sense.
Well, see, a womanist would tell you you don't give me grace. a
womanist would say what?
A womanist theologian to say, no, sir, you don't give me grace. God gives me grace, and I give myself grace. It's about self-empowerment. It's about empowering myself.
Yeah.
And womenist theology is about self-empowerment. It is about us reclaiming our stake and our place in society theologically, from a theological perspective. And I'll defer to Pastor Carner because she could probably unpack it a little bit better.
And if I can be honest, I didn't really get the distinction between Black feminist and womanist until I started this program. That
Right.
The womanist movement itself started because African American women did not want to sacrifice the role and the importance of the African American male. So the womanist movement is a point of departure from feminism. because
Yeah.
some feminists were saying we appreciate the Black woman, but we don't accept the Black man. But the womanist says, I need to see everyone at the table. And I'm not saying that I ascribe to be a womanist scholar just yet. I'm not far enough in my PhD journey to say, but I will say I like the whole idea that the Black female experience can be a lens through which I view the biblical text. And that is how I understand the definition of womanism. But to your point, Dr. Smith, I'm not sure if a lot of people know that. I'm not sure if when they hear the word womanist, they are thinking that this is the lens through which an African American female views the biblical text. They're thinking that somehow this is a movement that devalues men when its impetus was in making sure the brothers were able to rise with the African American woman.
I love it. You
Oh,
know, one of the things you go ahead, please go ahead. Go ahead.
and I was going to say a really good book about this that made this clear for me is Kimberly Johnson's book. She has a new book called The Womanist Preacher.
Yeah.
And it really, it chronicles that whole movement with Katie Geneva Cannon, Donna Allen, I mentioned earlier, Elaine Flake, and how Alice Walker's definition of womanism has been massaged to create 4 tenets that we see in womanist preaching, the womanist preaching of Gina Stewart and a couple of others. So I'd like to suggest Kimberly Johnson's work as a way for us to really start that conversation in a healthy way.
So important, you know. I told people, I think a couple weeks ago when I started dating Andrea, that Andrea, you know, I'm a preacher in school. And even when we got married, she made way more money than I did, way more money than I did. And a lot of my colleagues thought I was crazy for marrying her. I'm talking about 25 years ago, that they couldn't see me marrying her because she made so much more money than I did, and I was not offended in any way, shape, form, or fashion. You know, and so I just think we got to continue to break those things down. But you made a good point, Pastor Connor, and that it is not the role of women to deconstruct patriarchy. And Dr. Howard said the same thing. I want to use it as a segue because we've seen what has happened since this whole Trayvon Martin death, and George Zimmerman is still walking the face of the earth. That's one of the questions I'm going to ask the Lord when I get to the kingdom. How is he still walking the face of the earth? But that's another that's another subject for another day. But from Sandra Bland and, of course, Breonna Taylor, because I don't want to leave our women out of the conversation. Unfortunately, sometimes our sisters have been left out of the conversation of police brutality. And I think sometimes it's because we've seen more images of Eric Garner being killed and Philando Castile, you know, in his car, you know, and most recently Ahmaud Arbery, and then what we saw with George Floyd. So I think it's more charged, not sometimes necessarily because of our omission of women, but because we saw people die, literally on camera. But I still think we should not leave the women out of the conversation. But with that being said, how are you navigating as millennials? Because we have seen uprisings all over America. People are tired of what's happening, and there's been many people who millennials and Gen Z, you know, millennials who are changing the world as the young people do during the days of the SNCC. You know, young people, sit-ins and college students. What has your perception been? What are your thoughts regarding the role of justice, the role of protests, rebellions, riots, you know, those who are being disruptive? Because there's a lot of thought, a lot of respectability, politics being hurled out. But I want to hear from you. What do you sense? What do you see in terms of the uprisings that have taken place in America due to George Floyd's death? Anybody?
Certainly, I see a cycle of history repeating itself. Freedom rides, SNCC, sit-ins, Montgomery, Selma, marches, black folk being beaten. Right? We're repeating history, but in this day and age, check it. Here's the difference. Right? The difference is we're getting it in real time. Because of the expedited manner in which the media works, and because of the microwave society in which we live in, that gives us news instantly. And so we're getting it in real time, whereas our forefathers, our baby boomers, even Gen X to a certain degree, they had to get it through newspapers, but there were many of our forefathers and foremothers that saw lynchings in person. in real time. They saw lynchings in person, mass lynchings in person, mass killings in person. And so, but we're getting it in real time, and we're getting it at such an expedited rate that it's overwhelming. But I will say this, I will say that rebellion is not foreign to who we are and what we've done. I have to be honest with you, and people you can take this away however you want to take it. But when I watch CNN and I see my brothers and sisters in my generation taking a stand and confronting the very system and the very people that are paid to protect and serve them, and saying we're not going to take this anymore, I get a sense of satisfaction because rebellion is innate to the American construct. In fact, America was birthed out of rebellion. We don't say anything. We praise the Boston Tea Party. And I know you posted this the other day, Dr. Smith, and people have been talking about this. We praise and we hail the people who put up a rebellion in the Boston Tea Party, in which there was $2 million of destruction done. And $2 million in those days would equate to somewhere around almost $200 million in today's context. And so when you talk about rebellion is innate to the American construct. We salute rebellion when we talk about the American Revolution, when we talk about blue coats fighting red coats, we salute that, but we can't salute rebellion when we talk about Malcolm X marching in the streets with 50 armed Muslims. We don't like that kind of rebellion. We don't like the kind of rebellion that has King marching across bridges and getting hit in the head, and freedom rides where young college students were beaten. We don't like that kind of rebellion because it's not the kind of rebellion that America wants to define. And one thing about rebellion, you can't define rebellion. Rebellion is innate to the very people who are being oppressed. And I'm going to be honest with you, over the last couple of days when I've been watching stuff burn down, I've had a sense of satisfaction, and I'm not even going to lie to you. I've had a sense of satisfaction, and the reason why is because it is the only thing that gets the American, the conscience of America. It gets their attention. It's the only thing that gets their attention. It's the only thing that, when you're affecting the bottom line, money, or when you're affecting their safety, that's the only thing that gets the attention of white America. That's the only thing. Trump he didn't want to acknowledge anything about any of these black kids, these black young people dying, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. Nothing was said. George Floyd, nothing was said. But as soon as you burn down a Target, we're thugs. Well, guess what, Mr. 45? Everybody that was burning down stuff weren't black. Hello, they weren't black or brown. And so the millennial generation is fed up. And millennial generation, by definition, is 44% diverse ethnic, meaning that we're the most diverse generation in history in terms of mixed race, in terms of different, different races and so on. We're the most multi-ethnic generation in history. And guess what? It's not just black and brown people that are getting fed up with this. It is all of the generation that is fed up with the systemic oppression of black and brown people and poor people in this country. I've been satisfied, to be honest with you.
Wow.
That's such a powerful thing. I think also, what's my problem with those that are in power who are demonizing our protests. I asked them, what other means of protest do we really have? If we take a knee on a football field, then we lose our job and we're blackballed from a sport that we were gifted to play. If we try to stand up, our voices are suppressed. So the other option is this type of outcry. But I also want to say this, and this is part of that protest that even upset me when I realized it. One of the tactics that has been used historically with police departments is that they will embed their own among the protesters and to cause more havoc, to create this narrative that the protesters are burning everything down, when in some cases it's not protesters. There are those who've been embedded there to take away the narrative from being about what it's really been about. It's similar to what 45 did with Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. He took control of the narrative so that he could let the world see, okay, this is what this is, when in fact that's not what it is. There's a video circulating around social media right now where it's suspected that a police officer from St. Paul, Minnesota, was actually walking around with a gas mask and breaking windows and setting fires to give the appearance to the American public that all of these angry protesters are doing this, when the truth is that's not the thing. And so I am infuriated when I see the coverage, because for me, I see our brothers and sisters who are trying to get the attention of a government who pretends that our plight does not exist, but they're also poisoning the protest by trying to control the narrative by making it worse than what we're making it. And I think that's even another devilish tactic that I feel like that the majority uses to suppress our cause, to suppress our voice. And when we do have the world's attention, then they also want to poison that as well by making our protests more about destruction than about construction, or reconstruction, so to speak, of the terrible nature of our justice system. Most people say we need to get some changes made, but the truth is it was built wrong in the first place. It's been wrong from the start. So we've got to go right back to the grassroots of it and rebuild it, because now you think about the prison industrial complex. Now that's the new Jim Crow. That's the new form of slavery. So I think what has hurt me the most is realizing that even in the protests, there are people who are still trying to take control of our narrative and tell our story, that this is what we're doing. And the truth is, no, we're not trying to destroy buildings. We're trying to destroy the things that are killing us. And I think that for me is one of the things that I have taken out of this protest. So like my brother, I am in celebration and solidarity, I think, with those that are protesting, because listen, this is the only way we can get their attention, so to speak. Until we mess with things that affect them, then they're not going to be affected by what's going on with us.
I would say I agree with what both of you have shared, both you, Dr. Howard, and then of course you, Pastor Trey, because there's been a quote circulating. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, where it's a quote from Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King, that says that protest gives voice to the unheard or to the voiceless. And so I think that what we're seeing right now is that people are beginning to speak out in the only way that we can. This is the first time we've been able to really get some people's attention as it pertains to the devaluing of Black life. And so one thing that I wanted to say as I listened to both of you, one thing that we haven't touched on is theology of resistance. I've been reading a little Kelly Brown Douglas in her book, Stand Your Ground. And what I'm starting to realize is that we have a responsibility as faith leaders to galvanize our churches and develop our own theology of resistance. What do I mean by that? We need to give our people strategies of how we're going to dismantle the system that creates this racist environment and a lot of these underpinnings that we're seeing right now. We've got to encourage, not only encourage our congregations to vote and to complete the census, but we've got to find some really strategic ways to help dismantle the system that creates some of these racial societal norms and the devaluing of Black life. I love what Kelly Brown Douglas says. She says that the African American body is not just something that the white culture hates, but it is a threat to their cherished white property. And so I think if we as pastors, faith leaders, if we can pick where we are and define our theologies of resistance and share with our congregations what we're going to do to dismantle the system, I think that we could make even more gains in addition to the protest and our voices being heard. I think by developing a strategy for how we're going to dismantle these systems, I think that's going to be key in these next few weeks. To you, Dr. Howard, is what can we do along those lines as we talk about dismantling the system on a local level as a pastor? What can we do to push the agenda? We know the protesting is happening, but what next? What can we do to push this agenda forward?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. And the reality of the matter is, I think it's both. I think we need both and. Because what you need is you do need protests and you do need to bring these social injustices to light, but you need legislation, period. You can't get around legislation. Legislation is key. And that's one of the things I've been talking to a couple of lawyers in our congregation about in terms of actually educating our people on the power of legislation, which is absolutely critical and absolutely necessary, which also goes into voting. Voting is an anchor to all of this, because in order to have the right DA to prosecute cases justly and without bias, you have to elect your DA, right? You have to elect these people on a local level. You have to have the right people in Congress, in the Senate. As you can see, we have Congress. I mean, we have the House, but we don't have the Senate. And so there's a divide there, and it works in our favor sometimes, and sometimes it does not. But the voting is absolutely critical, because you have to have the right representatives that are actually pushing the right kind of legislation. And congregations, pastors, public personalities, and leaders need to be in conversation with people who write legislation, people who actually can propose laws that, like, I saw somebody, a lawyer from our congregation. She's absolutely phenomenal, and she had this idea. She said, "Why don't we pass something called the Garner Law?" Eric Garner, I can't breathe, right? Why don't we pass something called the Garner Law? And the Garner Law would suggest that if somebody who is a quote unquote suspect or is being put under arrest is under duress, or they are being handled in a way to where they say, "I can't breathe," then that police officer has to immediately stop and change the tactic on the way in which they're handling that individual, call for backup. I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was a phenomenal law. You can call it the Garner Law, and but you need the individuals in place, the state reps, the county reps, who can put legislation in conversation. You do need the protest. You do need the march. You do need the kneelings, right? But you need legislation, and you need the voting. It goes hand in hand.
Trey, you want to say something?
No, I was going to say that, I would agree with both of what they both have said. I think protests as well as on the legislative side. But I think also what we also need in this is we need our white counterparts, those who do not have the same systemic mentality. I think we need them to speak up. This is not the time to have laryngitis. This is not the time to be silent, because we need our white brothers and sisters to say this is not right. Part of why it is allowed to go so unchecked is because there are so many of the majority who are not saying a word. It's as if we're cool as long as it's not our child. But I feel like that part of this also, yes, we can protest. Yes, we have to have legislative processes in place. But at the same time, it takes those brothers and sisters who are on the other side of that line to say, listen, I want to speak up. I want to speak up and say that this is not right, and to also join the fight with us. I think it's not enough of that, especially, and I know I may cause some problems, Pastor Smith, but for my evangelical brothers and sisters, they're definitely silent now. Now that our kids are lying in the street, they're definitely silent now. But they were speaking up on other issues. And what my problem is, a lot of them would fight abortion and want to fight for that. But then when those same black children grow up, we won't fight for them when their lives are being ended by policemen who are sworn in to protect their lives. I have a problem with their silence now, because you can speak up on certain issues, but the truth of the matter is that Jesus Christ was concerned with the culture, and that's a cultural problem going on in our community. And our white brothers and sisters who believe in Jesus cannot be silent.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
Dr. Smith, and I wanna thank you for something you said last night on your Friday Night Live. I've been trying to share with people that Jesus was not mealy mouthed personality. When you look at John Howard Yoder's book, The Politics of Jesus, Jesus practiced holy rage. And so I think it's important that we give our churches a theological framework for anger, that it's okay to be angry, that all of those feelings are natural as long as we channel them, as Pastor Trey so eloquently put it, and Dr. Howard so eloquently put it, as long as we channel it into some social action and some concrete legislation, as well, in addition to the protest, I think it's a very healthy thing. I loved what you said about Jesus turning over those tables. I believe not only did he turn over the tables in the temple because of some malpractice, but I believe when he turned it over, he hoped it would land on somebody. And I think that all of that is okay in this season to talk to our congregations about how controversial Jesus really was and how political Jesus' agenda was.
Not how.
Yeah.
Trey is absolutely correct. Trey is absolutely correct in his because black folk, we've been working. We've been working for centuries. Let's be clear. We've been with my mama, my grandmama, they've been working, right? Listen, and I'm gonna say it again. I'm gonna be succinct because I know we're running short on time. Black folk can't dismantle white supremacy. Black people cannot dismantle these social constructs because we did not create them. We didn't create them. White people have to speak up, and white voices with influence need to be willing to take a risk and talk to their white counterparts. That's why I appreciate Steve Furtick in this season. Steve Furtick actually did a series on white privilege. Right? He did a series on white privilege, knowing and understanding what he sees in the culture, sees happening to black bodies and black people, and knowing he has black members. How can you stand by and you call yourself a bicultural pastor and you know you have black folk in your congregation and you don't speak to white privilege and white supremacy? Trey is absolutely on point. White people or white folk with influence have to use that influence to dismantle white patriarchy and systemic injustice because their forefathers were the ones who created it.
Absolutely.
Listen, this has been most helpful and refreshing. I appreciate your genius. I appreciate your sharing. I appreciate all God has made you to be, just the holistic packages that you are in your own unique way. You shared a whole lot today. You blessed us. You blessed me. I pray God's blessings on each of you as you continue to navigate ministry and your professions and your personal lives, that God's going to continue to use you because you guys are all standard bearers. You're some wonderful human beings and some great representatives of the kingdom of God. So thank you for being a part for this part 2 of Single in the City. Hey, family, I hope you've been blessed by Single in the City Part 2. We had Dr. Howard, Pastor Carn, and Pastor Trey, who blessed us immensely. They dropped a lot on us. I hope you've been encouraged. I hope you've been inspired. That even in these difficult times, we won't lose our faith. They gave us some pragmatic steps and some things that we can do to vent our rage properly and to have that rage that's healthy. We're going to get through this. God's going to get us through it. God is not intimidated by revolution or pandemic. We're going to make it. I speak God's blessings over every single who's watching this today. And please know this, if you'll be good to God, then God will be good to you. Until we meet again, peace. Take care. Y'all stay safe.